Hello out there, you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear, listening into another Gamer's Thoughts discussion. And this time I'm going to be talking about what we heard about the results of the FTC versus Microsoft hearing. It looks like Microsoft won that case, and it does look like they potentially will be going forward with the acquisition of Activision-Blizzard. So, and that's because in the UK they've already said that they'll put an injunction in on the case in order to be able to work out a deal, because they were concerned about Microsoft being too big of an entity taking over the cloud space, which they are starting to heavily utilize over there. So, first things first, congrats to Microsoft on winning your hearing. Honestly, I kind of expected this result, especially with some of the things I heard coming out of the hearing. And I was looking on social media and see people who were like, well, this is a horrible take by Microsoft. Like, I'll do a discussion about some of the individual things that came out. But here's the one thing I want to explain about all of those ridiculous ass takes that came out of what Microsoft had said during that hearing. They were punching down. So they had to make themselves seem like they were not as capable or competent in the space as Sony. That's why so many of these weird ass statements came out, and that's potentially why Phil Spencer went ahead and said, and I'm not quoting him directly, but he said that great games do not necessarily make for a good console generation. And you know what he can do to prove that? He can literally go point to the Wii U, which had a bunch of great games on it that nobody wanted. But many of those games got translated over to the Switch and people bought them. He can literally use that as an example. I understand why that take upsets people, but he literally has a console that was within the last decade that had that problem. So yeah, his statement, while it is odd as fuck and it makes no sense to those of us that pay attention to things, but in the general standpoint, you say that to the general public and then you point to that example, then people are like, oh yeah, I understand that. But again, I will do a separate discussion on the weird ass takes that came out of this whole situation and try to explain them to the best of my ability. Again, I am not a legal expert in any way, shape, or form, but I will do my best to explain those things as easy as I can. Now, for those that are upset by this, trust me, I understand. Again, I'm not one for companies buying up a bunch of shit, trying to consume the industry. Unfortunately, that's been Microsoft's way for a long ass time. That's just something that they do. If they get into a space, they try to consume it whole. Look at any other industry that they are in, and you would have understood that this was coming. You would have understood that, and no doubt that this was coming. This was something that was going to happen. And there are no two ways about that. This was something that they were most definitely going to do. So it's not something that could have been avoided. They were going to definitely try to acquire as many things as possible to try to buy themselves in the first place. The only difference with the Activision-Blizzard situation is that they want to be bought out because they're trying to get rid of the guy running the company, because there is a bullshit ass deal in place where he can do anything that he wants and he still gets paid a massive amount of money the moment they remove him from his seat. He can basically bankrupt the company if they get rid of him under the current circumstances. So they need someone else to buy them out in order for that to be able to be voided. Or at the very least, so somebody can afford to pay that off without the company itself tanking completely. And this man has done many fucked up things and been part of many of the shitty ass situations that took place at Activision-Blizzard. Hopefully, things will get better. Hopefully, there will be a better work culture. We don't know that. That is yet to be seen. But I do know for a fact that motherfucker needs to be removed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, again, I get why people are agitated, because this, if it consistently keeps happening, this is bad for the industry. But if you're mad about this, then you should also be mad about all of the things Sony did when they got into the industry. Because before Microsoft got here, Sony was the one doing the money hatting. And it started when they released the PS1. A lot of us weren't privy to it back then, because we didn't know the ins and outs the same way. A lot of information didn't come out back then, but we know now. So if you're going to be mad at Microsoft for buying companies that want to be bought, just remember that. Companies that want to be bought. And acquiring IP, I wish that they would fucking use. If you're going to be mad at them for that, then you need to be mad at Sony for all the exclusivity deals that they did. Like, yeah, exclusivity deals can eventually run out. And they do sometimes. But that doesn't necessarily change the perception of what that exclusivity deal set up. It doesn't change the perception of that right away. That's potentially one of the reasons why Microsoft can't really do well with JRPGs, because when you think about it, going back to the OG Xbox, they didn't really have any. They had a lot of PC stuff, and they ended up with a lot of shooters and sports games, and that's where the dude bro culture started to become a thing. But they never actually really had a chance to really run with very many Japanese developed RPGs. And it wasn't until the Xbox 360 where that was even attempted. And by then, the perception was already set. This is not a place for that for you. Microsoft isn't the platform for this. And then it became Microsoft's not the platform to play anything with mascots on, because the mascot games that they did try to create or attempted to create didn't really take well. Yeah, there are some people that, you know, understandably knew, like, yeah, these were good games and stuff like that, but people don't really look to them for that type of stuff. And the fact that Master Chief is the mascot for Xbox proves that. But a lot of those backdoor deals that Sony did for exclusivity to games, specifically, has the same direct effect as Microsoft purchasing a whole company. The only potential difference here is that Microsoft may allow many of those games to go to other platforms with deals set in place. The exclusivity deals that Sony set back in the day didn't have such a clause in them. We still haven't, and I don't even, now I'm thinking about the Metal Gear Solid collection that's coming out. We still haven't seen Metal Gear Solid 4, at least to my knowledge, be put on another platform. Now, I don't remember if it was shown off in that collection. I don't think it was. I think it's the first 3 Metal Gear Solids and then Metal Gear games. I don't think it's the first. I don't think Metal Gear Solid 4 is a part of that package. I have to look back again. But we have not seen that game end up on any other platform just yet. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong in this moment. Because, no, let me pause for a second and look it up. Okay, so after checking, I was right. It is Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. Metal Gear, 2 versions of Metal Gear. Then Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, and Snake's Revenge. Those are the games that are a part of that first collection. Metal Gear Solid 4 is not a part of that. We have not seen anything coming up from that where Metal Gear Solid 4 is going to be on a different platform. But this is also Master Collection Volume 1. So if they do a Master Collection Volume 2, it may potentially be on there for other platforms. We just don't know yet. But again, there's perceived things about the platforms based on those initial deals that Sony set in the industry. A lot of those deals hurt Nintendo in many ways, and hurt any potential other companies that wanted to get into the industry. Those deals also hurt Sega. Part of the reason why Sega ended up dropping out of the console race is because they couldn't get games that were going to other platforms. That's one of the reasons that they dropped out of the space. The other major reason is the mismanagement of their resources. But you got to acknowledge that type of stuff if you're going to be mad about Microsoft's acquisitions. You can't be mad that one company did a bunch of stuff you don't like, and then not be mad at the other company for doing pretty much the same thing but on a lower scale. Yeah, Sony did a lot of things to keep stuff off of other platforms. And with Jim Ryan basically saying that he was afraid that Microsoft was going to give them gimped versions of games. That's very telling. That is very telling, because at that point you realize that means Sony was paying companies to gimp versions of games on other platforms. Let that sink in. Sony was paying other companies. Paying companies to give gimped versions of games on other platforms. So how many of those games that came out on the Wii U specifically, when its hardware was better than that of the 360 and the PS3, how many of those gimped versions of those games were paid to be gimped by Sony? Where the features were taken away for no fucking reason. And then we got the bullshit as excuse, well, the online doesn't work. We've had multiple games, had online capabilities, and could see, oh yeah, the online works pretty decently. And that's where that idea came from. I know that the online on the Wii itself wasn't the best, but it was stable. And online on the Wii U was also stable. Online on the Switch, stable. The idea that it was unstable came around the Wii U's time frame. That's why when Arkham City Origins came out on the Wii U and that online multiplayer was taken out, that was one of the reasons cited. Gives you a little bit different of a perspective now, doesn't it? When you think about it a little bit more nuanced. So exclusivity deals can be used for games specifically, can be used the same way as a total acquisition of a company. Those are strategic moves. That's something that has to be thought out, that has to be planned out, that has to be, something that is attempted going forward. I'm just be honest here. We keep hearing that Call of Duty can't run on the Switch. Okay, that didn't matter for the Wii, did it? Modern Warfare Reflex? Anybody? Or did it matter for the DS? Because I remember correctly, DS had plenty of Call of Duty games. Maybe they weren't one-to-one with the console versions, but that's never been the thing when it came down to handheld anyway. Oh, but that's right. Call of Duty's on mobile phones. But we can't, for some reason, figure out how to put it on fixed hardware. That is the same across every iteration of the device. Now, we're incapable of doing that, right? That's not plausible. That to me smells of prior tampering. To say, hey, if this is here, there's a chance that we may be screwed because a bunch of people will flock to that because of its portability and availability to be able to play at any time, any place. That's something to consider. That's something to think about. Especially looking at how things are. Money having getting into the gaming industry was a bad move. It was always a bad move. There's a difference between specific contracts, and I know I just talked about contracts, exclusivity contracts can be bad. But there's a difference when a third-party company goes to one of the platform developers and like, hey, we think this idea would work for your platform. Do you want to work out a deal for us after we present this to you? Or, in the case of Bayonetta, where Nintendo saved the franchise because Microsoft and Sony had the opportunity to make it exclusive to themselves, and everybody else got mad about that. Everybody got mad about that. But I always said, if that ended up a PlayStation exclusive, if Sony jumped on that, no one would have been mad about it. No one would have said shit. I mean, I wouldn't have been mad. I would have just been happy that the series continues. So it really comes down to the situational use of those exclusivity deals. It does. And we've seen that Sony has had a hand in using them negatively. Even in non-exclusivity for platforms. And that's the thing to think about. If I'm going back to just a brief moment, going back to the GIMP ports for the Nintendo platforms, because Sony didn't, and I doubt Microsoft did it. Now that all this stuff has come out, I doubt Microsoft was the one that did this. They could have, but I'm doubting it, at least in this situation, until more information comes out. So I'm doubting that I'm doubting that Microsoft put in any clauses that meant for games to be gimped on Nintendo's hardware. Back then, Sony, at the time, just think about this. You're coming off of the success of the Wii. Now, granted, Nintendo didn't do the best of jobs advertising the Wii U, especially in its first year. We can all acknowledge that. But if you're coming off of the success of the Wii, which is many times weaker than the Xbox 360 and PS3 as hardware is concerned, and then Nintendo comes out with a platform that eclipses both of those, and you weren't ready for them to do that, what's the best way to make things fall apart for that? Negative media coverage, bad game ports. Those are the two best ways to shut that down. And they still made a profit off of that machine, even if it wasn't the profit that they wanted. And I'm pretty sure they'll revisit the concept again once people are less, about it. Which is weird because you have people who game on PC with multiple monitors, but you can't understand the concept of multiple screens on a home console. I still don't get that. Because even back then, people had multiple monitor setups. So it's like, you understand it here, but you don't understand it over here, when it is functionally very similar. I'm never going to understand that. I'm just not. It's either people are playing stupid or paid to be stupid. So I don't see an in between on that. There may be some people who just generally didn't understand the concept, but I'm not talking about just like the general public. I am talking about the people that are in the gaming space. I don't see how many of them didn't understand that concept. But getting back to my main point here. Again, I'm not a fan of Microsoft acquiring every company out there. I'm definitely not. They attempted to acquire Nintendo. We all know this. And my thing is, they attempted to acquire Nintendo. They must have thought highly of the company. So while I do see the money hatting to get into the industry, I don't know if they necessarily money had it to gimp someone else versus money hatting to try to boost themselves. Now, in boosting themselves, they could have potentially gimped someone else, but I'm not looking at it as purposeful gimping, where they went out the way and said, hey, if you do this, we'll slide you a little extra money. Sony, on the other hand, Jim Ryan kind of made it kind of obvious that Sony has done that. At the very least, Jim Ryan has made it very obvious that Sony has done that. Or at the very least, attempted to do that. And as somebody who likes every platform, or likes some things about every platform, and somebody who can criticize every platform, why is it that it is so hard for people to understand that the things that Sony did hurt the industry? Microsoft did things that hurt the industry as well. Nintendo even did things that hurt the industry. But as far as scale goes, level of scale goes, what Sony has done has had a bigger negative impact on the industry. Again, they came in as a huge conglomerate and ended up fucking over so many companies with what they did. Let's follow this trail of history. Sony works with Nintendo to make a CD-based platform that connects to the Super NES. But in doing so, Sony says that they want, I believe it was like 80% of the profits from the games that would have been produced for said platform. I might be wrong on the percentage, but I know it was a large chunk. Nintendo said, fuck that, we're not doing that. This is after months and months and months of working to put this platform together. Yeah, they may have announced the deal one day and then the next day it was shut down. Look at the contract that they may have potentially been sent, where Sony was basically trying to consume the profits from the stuff they developed. Sony was trying to consume the profits from the stuff that Nintendo developed. It'd be one thing if Sony said, hey, look, we need a nice chunk. I would say 30% would have been reasonable. 30% of the profits would have been reasonable because Nintendo would have been the developer for everything. The developer is still the one that deserves the majority of the profit from their work. Sony's deal was shitty. And people tend to, whenever this comes up, everyone ignores this whole detail. I don't know why everyone just glosses over that particular bit of information, because it is extremely important to this. So, we got that. Sony says, fuck it then, we'll go ahead and put out the system ourselves. They do so. Then they literally money hat the fuck out of everything. Taking franchises that were on Nintendo proper, that were not exclusive to Nintendo, that could have been put on any other platform, but taking them and money hatting a lot of that shit. They've been doing it since they've been in the industry. No one bats an eyelash about that. No one. No one sits back and says, oh shit, Sony really did come in and money hat the fuck out the industry. They created the problem they're fighting now. Of course, you have a bigger conglomerate comes into the industry and sees, okay, this is the culture that you created. Guess what? I'm going to work within that culture and do the same shit. That's literally what the fuck is going on. Microsoft just has more money to do something bigger. Yes, I'm ticked off that companies have to be bought out by these big ass companies in order for something to survive in the industry. I'm pissed off that has to happen. Let me make that 100% clear. I'd be pissed off if Nintendo was doing it, but they don't. They figured out a long ass time ago that they cannot compete financially with these companies, so they didn't. And when Iwata said it while he was still alive, everybody laughed at him for it. But he turned out to be fucking 100% right. Literally right now, Microsoft and Sony do not need any more platform upgrades. They do not. With the way things are in the industry, they literally need to leave these machines on the fucking market for about 15 years. That's how long they need in order for there to be anything profitable coming from these systems for the industry to eventually catch up to it. Because the way they've done things has made everything super fucking expensive. That's what money hatting the industry did. People may not like the fact that Nintendo set up certain things when they were the top of the industry, but they did it with reason, because it was sustainable. The way things have gone since Sony has been in the market, we've lost how many companies? Lost how many middleware developers? Due to money hatting and trying to keep up with higher tiers of technology that they did not need to try to keep up with. You don't need the latest and greatest for every platform. What you need is tried and tested hardware, which is what used to be done. Is what Nintendo still does. So, I mean, hey, you can be mad at me for saying it. You can be mad at me for not giving too much of a fuck outside of what I just said. But that's the case. Microsoft and Sony money hatting has been bad for the industry. Because the companies can't organically grow like that. Then they become beholden to the console manufacturers. Besides just having a platform to put their games on, they become beholden to console manufacturers because they're giving them money for their game, which is not supposed to be the case. And it irritates me where people want to just latch on to being agitated about this particular thing, but won't look at the all-encompassing shit that's been happening around it. It's been happening for a long-ass fucking time. Again, a lot of us weren't privy to this stuff when we were growing up, so I'm not going to say it was our fault for not knowing it back then. But if you know it now, let's not pretend that the shit didn't happen. Let's not pretend that this wasn't in the works for a long-ass fucking time. Because it was. Now, the one thing I'm willing to give Microsoft a chance on is to actually keep to those contracts that they set. If Sony doesn't want to work on setting up a contract with them, well, that's just tough shit for Sony. So they can either set up the contract and keep the games on the platform, or they'll have to develop something themselves. Now, I would love for Sony to actually start developing a lot more different style games other than the cinematic shit they put out. Because it's becoming one note. The fact that The Last of Us has been remade twice is fucking ridiculous. It's like they can't think of anything else. And the styling of their games is showing that. Like, yeah, I mean, Spider-Man. If you fuck up Spider-Man, that's a problem on you. Spider-Man is pretty simple to understand. in a general sense. But The Last of Us, God of War. Now, I'm not saying the games are bad, but they use the same aesthetic as The Last of Us. And when people probably aren't understanding, they're like, well, they're just set in different time periods. There's no way the aesthetic is the same. Same over-the-shoulder perspective. Same slow movement. Same gritty details. That's the aesthetic. Hell, Horizon is very similar in that aspect. Yeah, there are differences among the games, but there's a general aesthetic that feels the same about them. And it feels like Sony is stuck in that. So hopefully, if they're not going to play ball with this idea, they'll come up with something. They'll let their teams be creative. Otherwise, they're on a sinking ship. And Sony themselves has a lot of IPs. They should have never given up Crash and Spyro, but they have a lot of fucking IPs. So they could legitimately create something great, and it wouldn't have to be waited on. That was a horrible pun, I'm sorry. And Microsoft, you have so much shit now. If you can't take your teams and start developing some smaller games like I fucking said, this is going to be a horrible road for you guys too. You need to start generating first-party content. And you need not to force teams to put out a game that they don't want to put out because you don't have anything the fuck else. You're in position now where you should not buy another fucking company. You should not buy another goddamn company. Not one. You guys have bought up, what was it like? Somewhere between 12 and 15 studios in the last 7 years. No more. No more until you can actually, like, not until. No more. No more. We do not need all of the industry under one fucking hat. No more. No more of this shit. Sony, no more money having to disable games on other fucking platforms. No more of this shit. It's fucking up the industry. Not like they're gonna listen to me anyway. I'm just one random dude on the fucking internet without a large base of people to follow me. So I'm literally just talking into the wind here. Expressing my thoughts and ideas, but I'm talking into the wind here. Again, we don't need anything else bought up by Microsoft. Not a fucking thing. I know they intend to buy more shit, but we don't need anything else bought up by Microsoft. Nothing. Nothing. Not a fucking thing. Nothing else. This shit is getting monotonous. No more. No more. The Activision-Blizzard deal goes through. Don't touch a fucking contract, pen or paper to buy another fucking company. Do not. Just don't. I know I've said that like I don't know how many fucking times, but don't. Sony, start creating different types of fucking content. Stop giving us the same third-person view for every fucking thing that you create. Put more emphasis into your VR. Hell, actually try to make it a separate fucking platform. Like separate of the fucking PS5. And Project Q, I don't even want to get on that shit because the concept is literally just taking the Wii U gamepad and taking features away from it to be able to allow you to play your games from a distance from home. Still requires a stable online connection. If your connection is not stable, then you don't get to play shit. So, put out more fucking content. Sony puts out highly rated games, so the shit that they do is quality. It's just the same quality. And when I say that, I'm just talking like aesthetically, a lot of the games have very much the same shit. Unless it's developed by another company and then put on their hardware, it's a lot of the same shit. And I know that has to sound ironic coming from someone who is mostly a Nintendo fan in this version of the industry. But at least when Nintendo puts out a game, for the most part, they kind of feel different. With the exception of the new Super Mario Bros. Series of games, those all feel the same. I think that was done on purpose. I would just like to see this industry actually thrive, and I do know that the current course is spiraling out of control, and it needs to be course corrected. But again, I'm not going to be mad at one company specifically overdoing something that predates their entry into the industry. They took it up another level. I definitely agree to that. But effectively, they're still doing the same thing. At least in the forefront of things. On the back end, this could be bad. Could be very bad. Not going to deny that. But I'm also not going to ignore what we've already seen happen. I'm not going to ignore what we've already seen done. Or I'm not going to ignore what we've already learned has happened. That's a better way to say it, because we didn't see all this happening during the 5th and the 6th generation. We didn't see it happening. And by the 7th generation, when I and my cohorts were kind of privy to the idea, we got told that we were out of our fucking minds. Just for 2 generations later, just to find out that, yeah, nah, you guys were right. Actually, 1 generation later, because it was 8th generation, I mixed up my timeline. Sorry. Because I really didn't get into this space until like around the start of the 8th generation. So I was a little bit wrong. It was the end of the 7th, beginning of the 8th. But I think I've rambled. I think I've espoused my disapproval. I think I've also made an effective point with all of my off-the-wall expressions. So, and I'd say this because conversations happen. You realize when you're talking to someone that they hear what you say, but they don't understand what you say, and then they get mad when they think you don't understand them. So, I'm trying to make it clear, I did understand that person, but I also see the other angle. But that's it. Thank you guys very much for listening. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me, and keep you... I screwed that up, and that's just going to be left in... Peace out, everybody.